Do you believe in spirit protectors or guardian angels? Join us as we ponder that very question as we take on a case that will push your belief system to the very limit.
And the living room actually lit up in this pure white light. And as I was turning over, I could see a woman stood on the bed. She was towering down on me.
Episode 9, The Girl at the End of the Bed, Part 1. Hello there, I'm Tom Barrow and welcome to Inspectre Paranormal. Tonight we return to the Greater Manchester area to recall a very strange case that occurred all the way back in the early 1990s. As ever, joining us throughout our investigation, we'll have Jackie, Tom and Eli on board to help us try and figure out what happened. Tonight's story belongs to our witness, Glenn. He's now in his late 40s, 5'8" with glasses, with a big ginger beard.
I absolutely 100% believe in ghosts. I can't tell you what a ghost is, but there is something. I mean, my mum is actually fairly sort of psychic, I would say, not like fortune teller kind of psychic. If I've got any kind of gift, it's something that I've inherited from her. I had a fairly decent childhood. My parents were together the entire time. I was an only child. I wouldn't say I was spoiled, but I never went without. We moved to a semi-detached house in a fairly modern housing estate. It was only maybe about 11 years old when we actually first moved into it. My mum walked in, and again, she gets the sense of things, and she was like, "This house is not haunted." And it wasn't. But then in 1993, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and it was sort of after that things started to happen. And it only seemed to be happening to me at first, and I was 20 years old when it first started to happen. So the first thing that I remember happening was I used to be a bit of a heavy metal fan, and back in the day before we had Sky TV and all that, there was a TV show that used to air on a Friday night at 3 o'clock in the morning that was all like rock music videos. So I used to pre-record the video. I used to wait till my mum and dad went to bed, and then I'd go downstairs, and then I'd program the video, and then I'd go back to sleep. And so that's exactly what I did. They'd gone to bed. It must have been about midnight. So I just opened my door, I had a video cassette in my hand, and everything was dark. And I just put my foot on the top of the stairs, going down into the living room. And the living room actually lit up in this pure white light. Whiter than anything I've ever seen before. So I'm going down these stairs, and this brilliant white light is projecting from a corner where I can't see. So I'm walking down the steps, and I'm starting to turn to look to see where this is coming from. And the light is starting to shrink as I go further down the stairs, to the point where I could see where it was coming from. It had gone. I had no idea what it was.
Was there a window? Was there anything like
No,
that?
it was the door into the kitchen. In the kitchen, we had a conservatory, and then behind that, we had the garden. Obviously, I thought maybe a car, but there was no light source coming through from there. I remember being a bit freaked out by that. Not scared, but I was more intrigued than anything. So I programmed the video, and I went back to bed. I told my mum the next day, and she was like, "Don't know what that would be, there's nothing here." So, chalked it up to a weird experience. But then I started getting a lot of poltergeist activity happening. I would be in the living room or my bedroom. I'd hear something from the kitchen, and it would be the microwave just switching itself on. Or the kettle would be starting to boil. Just little things like that. And there was only me there. It would always be when my parents were not there, and nothing ever happened to them that they've ever told me. The most extreme one that happened was I used to do a lot of portraits, and I was sat on my bed drawing this portrait. And I was just in my own little world. And then suddenly my stereo system just blared on. Absolutely scared the living daylights out of myself. When I checked, because obviously you think, sat on the remote or something like that. The remote was right next to the stereo unit, so I turned it off. But the program that it had gone onto, I would have had to press like 3 buttons for it to actually activate that way. It was just a weird thing. And I kept telling my mum, and she was like, there's nothing here. Things were going missing. The most notable event was my wallet went missing. I was leaving to go out and check, you've got everything, and my wallet's not there, so I'm checking everywhere in my room. Bathroom, kitchen, living room, can't find it whatsoever. And so I end up not going where I was going.
You had to cancel your plans?
Because I had to cancel my plans because I didn't have my wallet with me. And then later in the day, or a couple of days later, I went up into the loft. And literally right at the top of the loft hatch was my wallet just lying there. And there was no way that I'd have dropped it up there, because the last time I'd been up the loft was maybe like a week before, and I'd used my wallet literally the day I even lost it. I knew I'd had it.
Were your parents pranksters? Would they play tricks?
Oh no, not at all. It wasn't something they would do. I even asked them. They had absolutely no clue. They were just like, no, you've just dropped it somewhere.
But you didn't have any animals. I suppose it's a bit of a long stretch. Would have taken a wallet in their mouth and then gone up some steps.
Well, we had a Pomeranian, so
anything's possible.
Not quite as capable of opening a hatch.
At this point, were you very much, why am I experiencing this and it's not happening to anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I did ask her, and she always kind of like poo-pooed it a little bit because she wasn't experiencing it. It was something that obviously wasn't happening. I mean, it happened for maybe about 3 months, like off and on. Like every couple of days, something would happen.
We're now going to open this up to our panellists. Tonight we're joined by our resident skeptic, Tom Paech, whilst in the opposite corner is our resident spiritualist and medium, Jackie Dennison. So Tom, there's so much to unpack from Glenn's story. We're going to start with the bright light that he experienced in his parents' living room all those years ago. What do you think he saw?
It could be something as simple as, a neighbour's car lights coming on, or a car driving past. Or it could even be something called photopsia. It's basically a condition where you see either bright lights or light flashes in your eyes, and it's caused by the gel in your eye pulling on your retina. But it is something that teenagers can suffer from. You see light flashes, but there's no sort of obvious reason for it.
That's interesting. So Jackie, what are your thoughts then?
I think because of what the family were going through at the time, I actually think that he has seen a spirit light. How he described it is how I have experienced it. He said it's like the purest, whitest light. You can't compare it to any light, like a light bulb or the sunlight. When you work with spirit light, it's a completely different feel. It has a very, very calming effect, and it is the brightest, whitest light, and yet it's not too bright that you can't look at it. So how he described it, I thought, that's spot on. And then as he got closer, it just slowly disappeared to nothing. I like the fact that he checked. It couldn't have been coming from a window or anywhere else. I think he saw the light to the spirit world.
So do you think it could be maybe some kind of protective force then?
I think it's probably a healing energy that was coming into the house.
So we'll next move on a bit to where it gets a little bit stranger. So here we've got a lot of poltergeist activity taking place and electrical equipment going off. And his wallet goes walkabouts and it's later found up in the loft. So what do you think's the cause of all this then?
We're around about that same sort of time period, aren't we? He's in his early 20s, and so the energy around a teenager or somebody in their early 20s is a very, very high vibrational energy, and it can attract poltergeist activity. And by that, I mean it's a collection of energy. So poltergeist activity is not necessarily a spirit that's haunting. It can just be a collection of energy, and we can create energy ourselves. So we have an energy that we can give off. You know, if you're with somebody who has got very, very high bouncy sort of energy, you can feel that. And when they leave the room, you say, oh gosh, I feel exhausted, you know, because you can sense their energy. And so this is an energy that then can stay in a room. And so I think that's this particular time frame. I think you've got a collection of things that are happening. He's a young man, he's got lots of energy, and spirit will move things. I call it an apport, when things are apported from one place to another. And I would like to think that they did that with his wallet because they didn't want him to go out. Potentially, had he have gone out, would he have been involved in an accident? Did something happen on the route where he would have gone? So maybe he was being protected at that time frame rather than just a mean ghost who wants to hide your wallet so you can't go out and have some fun, you know. And my first thought when I read that, I thought, well, has he been up to the attic before? But then he'd said, oh, I was up there the week before, but I've used my wallet since then. So he hadn't dropped his wallet there.
So, Tom, what do you think's the cause of these events then?
I think the electrical incident makes you think, is it faulty equipment, you know, where his hi-fi was going on or off? It could just be a faulty hi-fi, you know. And the wallet thing, I think there's a few things. It could be maybe gone into the loft and dropped his wallet without realising, or it's been accidentally packed away with something else. I'm always losing stuff. I find it in totally random places. I have no idea where it's got there. I couldn't find my keys from a van. Looked everywhere in the house. And then my neighbour across the road knocked on the door and said, oh, these are your keys? So I don't know how she ended up with them to this day. She said he just found them in the road.
Jackie, we next have Glenn's mum, who has psychic abilities, but she's adamant that the house is not haunted. Is it common to get two psychics with opposing views and experiences then?
Absolutely is, yes, because they may be working completely differently. So his mum has a psychic ability, but she might tune into energy differently to how he tunes into energy. And the fact that we've got an age difference, so you've got a young energy, which is a vibrant energy, which will attract a different kind of energy towards you. And we have emotions, you know, different people have different personalities. So, of course, we can link into things in a different way. So, yeah, it's quite possible that even though his mum is psychic, she wasn't picking up on the things that he was picking up on because they were not connecting to her. They were connecting to him.
We're now joined by a resident historian, Eli Lycett. So Eli, it's a very complex case, but is there anything significant about Glenn's parents' house then?
So the house is situated in an ancient settlement, Baxenden, a settlement from the 1100s, but otherwise you would view it as a Victorian era location. And in the area as well, there's the nearby Hambledon Hill, which actually translates from Old English as the Hill of Mutilation, and contains various ancient British burial mounds and a whole swathe of devil lore attached to the landscape as well. So devil lore and the kind of idea of the devil in the landscape comes about really through the medieval age when we're talking about ancient pagan sites. So the Hill of Mutilation is actually a hill that contains ancient burial mounds. There's thousands of them across the UK. But in that local area, as the community moves away from the older beliefs to the new incoming Christian beliefs, and let's not forget, in rural areas, that wasn't an overnight thing that happened. People would be going to church, the church would become an influence in their lives, but when you go back to your cottage, the world is very much the same as it's always been. You believe in the forces of nature that can impact the harvest. You believe in the forces of nature that can impact fertility. And all of that really has those ancient roots that cling to people's mindsets. So devil lore comes up in a way to stop a fascination with the old places of the landscape. And devil lore actually starts as a bit of a joke. So in the medieval age, the devil is seen as a bit of a bumbling fool. We might think today of having the devil, the figure of the devil, connected to a hill or a certain place in our landscape as being a really terrifying, kind of serious issue. Most of the stories in folklore about the devil I'll give you an example, and this is a really broad example of what you'll find in country folklore, are that the devil is angry that a church is being built on a hill, and so he picks up the stones that they're building the church with and tries to carry them off, but he's fooled by a local baker, and he drops the stones in a field at the bottom of the hill and runs off. And that's why we've now got those standing stones at the bottom of that hill. These explanations, this kind of tomfoolery of the devil, it's through the late 1500s, early 1600s, when we have the witch craze in England, that whole idea of the devil mutates. Suddenly the devil isn't a figure of fun. Suddenly those standing stones in that field are actually now people he's turned to stone. Because people have been out cavorting with the devil in the local landscape. The witches have been out cavorting with the devil, and they've been turned to stone. So that's where we start to get our modern idea of the devil in the landscape being a terrifying force. Up until then, that didn't really exist.
Obviously, with the rise of things like Christianity, is there a way of getting people to conform and behave themselves?
Yeah, absolutely, in a way. So what you have to imagine is the new religion comes in, people are still connected to the old ways, as it were, the old ideals. What dissuades people from carrying on with that way of thinking when they're quite remote, when they're out of the reach, really, of the everyday of the church? Well, it's stories. And so the devil becomes a figure of fun. So to associate with anything that's associated with the devil makes you a figure of fun. Then the devil becomes a very serious character, and for you to associate with the places he may be, such as Hambledon Hill, such as the old burial sites, well, it can get very serious in the 1600s. It's so easy to be accused of witchcraft, a very serious business indeed. So in that local area, that's what we have. We have this devil lore, this folklore attached to the ancient site, which in itself translates as the Hill of Mutilation.
So going back to Glenn's parents' house, obviously this was an 80s new build. Is there anything specific about it?
Nothing specific about that house. The only things that will be recorded, of course, are if there were serious crimes in the newspaper archives, if there was some kind of folklore locally that had grown up. But so many of these places, from the 1980s, the 1960s, the 1930s. The house I live in was born in the 1930s, but I know the land that it's on has been inhabited for, well, since at least the 1200s. So we have to move away from the contents of a particular building, a shell, and we have to really look at the broader picture of what's happened with that soil and that piece of earth.
Thanks to our panellists there, some interesting theories behind Glenn's experiences. We're now going to move our investigation forward several months later.
In 94, my dad died. Both me and my mum kind of expected to see my dad quite soon. And I was dreading it.
Why were you dreading it?
Because at that point I'd seen maybe 2 or 3 spirits, but there were never any kind of spirit that I had any kind of connection to. They were always strangers, you know. And because obviously you have feelings towards your parents, and he'd died, so it was a very sad time. Just didn't know if I could handle it. So I was dreading seeing my dad. But my mum was the opposite. She was very much wanting to see my dad. About 3 months after my dad had died, I was in my bedroom and I was reading a book. I was in bed. It was sort of August time, so it was that time where at 10 o'clock it's not completely dark, it's dusky. I was ready to go to bed by then, so I put my book down and turned my light off, and I just turned over to go to sleep. And that exact moment of me wanting to relax, my mum decided to clatter around in the bathroom. The bathroom is the other side of the wall from me. And I just remember just being like, oh, you know, noisy cow. And so I, like, you know, you turn over, like, change position in bed. And as I was turning over, I could see a woman stood on the bed. She was towering down on me. I could make her out because my eyes had adjusted to the sort of like the dim light by then. I would say she was fairly young, maybe 30s. She had long hair and she was wearing what looked like to be like a long white dress.
What was she looking at?
She was looking at me.
Were you terrified?
No, I was just confused. I just remember going, hi. And she actually reacted to me. She actually raised her hand up in a sort of a wave gesture. And then she literally drifted sideways into the wall and just disappeared. And at that point, I was just like out of bed.
You cannot sleep then, no.
Oh, I was so excited because I was like, come back. I'm like, come back. And I can hear my mum finishing up and going into bed. And I was like, do I tell my mum? And I was like, I'll tell her in the morning. I went down at breakfast and said to her, I said, I had a visitor last night. And she went, your dad? And I was like, no, it was a woman. And she was like, I don't know who that would be. And I described her to her. She was like, I have absolutely no idea who that would be.
It's all well and done, a ghost standing at the side of your bed.
Yeah.
But to have a ghost
actually
stood on your bed looking down at you.
Yeah.
Most people listening to this podcast would be absolutely terrified. But you weren't.
No, and to be honest, I read somewhere that spirits actually have some sort of aura about them, that when you're actually in their presence, you are actually quite calm. Having experienced that myself, I would actually quite believe that. About 3 months later, I'd just gotten a new CD, and my CD player in my room wasn't working at that time. There was a fault on it, so I waited for my mum to go to bed, and then I went down with my headphones and plugged into the living room stereo system that we had. And it wasn't anything spooky scenario. The living room lights were on. It wasn't like I was listening to something in the dark. I was just sat cross-legged in front of the stereo system, looking at the album cover, and then just had this sense to turn around. So I just looked over my shoulder, and the woman I'd seen stood at the end of the bed was stood at the bottom of the stairs. I looked, and then I did a double take, and when I did the double take, she'd gone.
Was she looking at you?
Yeah, she was just stood looking at me again. Music stopped. Come back.
Come back.
You know?
What do you think she wanted?
Part of me thinks that it was my grandma on my mum's side. I do believe she was there just to look over and protect, in a way. I don't believe in angels or, I'm agnostic as a rule. I believe there is something after death because I have experienced something. But I don't believe in any organised religion, so saying guardian angel isn't something that sits well with me, but it is one of the only ways you can describe something sometimes. I just felt like she was there to look over me. I only ever saw her twice, but during my sort of 20s, I used to feel her around me quite a lot. And I always felt she was behind me because I was never meant to see her. And the 2 times that I did see her were a complete accident.
Do you think that spirit was the same spirit that was being mischievous then?
I've never associated them together because she always came across like quite a serene character, not quite mischievous, and never had anything happen again. So yeah, it's mystery.
So Jackie, we'll next move on to Glenn seeing this woman at the end of the bed. What do you think he saw?
I think that this was a spirit who was watching over him, and he was quite excited to have seen this. So he's open to spirit energy, wants to see spirit energy. He's very happy about seeing this apparition there. But he was also quite comfortable, I think, with her as well. And so I think she was some kind of a protector. I think she was there protecting him and just watching over him, making sure he was okay. I think they've gone through such a lot of trauma in-house. Dad had passed away. So I think she was there guiding him and supporting him.
So do you think that she's some sort of protector helping him through his darkest days then?
I absolutely think that that's the case, yes. I think that this could even be like a family member or a spirit guide that is there protecting him and giving him spiritual support at a time when he needed it most.
Obviously at the time, Glenn was grieving his father too. So the question here is, are we more susceptible to the paranormal at times like this then?
Not necessarily more susceptible, more vulnerable because of what we're going through in a vulnerable way. The loss of somebody that we love, whether this is a family member, a friend, a colleague, or even an animal that we love dearly, so we're at a low ebb, and we want to know that they're okay. We want to make sure, especially if you've got an interest in all things psychic anyway, you would want to know. And we can actually want that connection too much. So grief is a very heavy vibration, and it can stop us from being able to make the connection that we would really love to make. So I think we're more vulnerable rather than more susceptible to the paranormal.
So Tom, what's your theory on this? Did Glenn see a woman at the end of his bed?
I think obviously Glenn's had a lot of emotional trauma around this time, losing his father. So I think it could even be something like, sort of PTSD, where it's his brain's way of dealing with the grief. So there's no sort of right or wrong way of dealing with that sort of situation. I think of him naturally feeling so upset, I think it's possibly made him feel a little bit better, seeing this woman.
But you don't think it's a ghost then?
No.
So Jackie, do you think that this spirit of a girl was the same spirit causing the poltergeist activity too?
Could have been somebody to get his attention, maybe so. It could very well have been her watching out for him. But with the wallet going missing to where it was, so is that there's no way that he could go out. It is mischievous, but at the same time, it could be a protective thing as well.
We're now joined by our resident historian, Eli Lycett. So, Eli, this girl at the end of the bed and her purpose, we can kind of read between the lines. There's some kind of thinking that she's some sort of protector or guardian. But what's the modern day mythology behind this then?
Well, the mythology of a protector in general is as old as time. For as long as people have been writing things down, people have been writing about being protected by some other kind of higher being. The other side of the coin, of course, is that's where we get demonic influences from in our culture, in the folklore, in history. But with guardians and protectors, there's several schools of thought. Some people are of the belief and always have been, that figure is connected to you through some kind of family line, that's connected to you in a very literal sense. Others, that they come from somewhere else entirely. They kind of guide you through periods of your life. And elsewhere as well, that these figures can be created. That's the most fascinating one for me, where we find that the idea, especially in a lot of Turkish culture, and when we go back, it's a big thing that you could create a kind of spirit form that would act as your protector. But here in England, really, I think most people would associate it with someone looking out for them, some kind of heavenly force, for want of a better word of putting it. But that's been with us for a very, very long time. We can even go back to situations in the medieval world where phantom armies would be seen in the sky. It goes all the way back to the advent of Christianity, literally. So the reason that the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity, which is where we get Roman Catholicism from, was that on the morning of a battle, he came out of his tent and looked into the sky and saw some form of blazing cross. That's what the records leave to us. Now, whether that was a cloud formation, something happened with the sunrise, don't know. But him seeing that made him feel that this new kind of rebellious religion of Christianity that was spreading throughout the Roman Empire was now on his side, was now his protector. So that's how old the concept is.
I think with Glenn's story though, he's got no idea who this woman is, and this kind of makes it even more stranger.
Well, it gives a really wide lens to view such an apparition through. If you have no idea or no feeling as to what you're seeing, what the interaction is, then it could be as simple as a haunting. Plenty of people report just a simple haunting. But with this figure, the fact that there's that feeling of connection and protection, that seems to have been communicated in some form, in some way alongside it, which is, again, very common when we look at these figures of spiritual protection that come in and out of people's lives, and many people believe in them. I actually know somebody who experienced something very similar regarding a kind of protective figure. They were living in a flat in Manchester, And as inexplicable as this sounds, several times they would see the outline of a figure just there in the living room who was apparently about 8 foot tall, outlined in electric blue. And a little while later, he went to a Spiritualist church. So this is maybe more Jackie's kind of wheelhouse, but he went to a Spiritualist church, and the medium actually said to him that there was a figure that had walked into the building with him and described this figure, and again being 7-8 feet tall, as some kind of protective spirit. Actually made reference to them being some kind of Trojan. I mean, how weird is that? But I've got nothing that makes me disbelieve the person who told me that story at all. And again, for someone else to pick up on it being a protective figure, this information somehow being communicated, very powerful, albeit strange, very powerful stuff.
Thanks to our panellists there. So that's it so far tonight as we pause our investigation. If you've got any theories on this case, add your comments to the episode posts on social media. I want to thank Glenn for bravely stepping forward and recalling what he witnessed. However, we're not quite done with his story just yet. Join us next time, where things are about to get a whole lot stranger.
Whatever it was now actually on the street, and it was following me home, and it was getting nearer. It was actually going to garrot my throat.
Inspector Paranormal was produced, written and presented by me, Tom Barrow. Show panellists were Jackie Dennison and Tom Paech. Historical research conducted and presented by Eli Lycett. The Inspector theme was written and produced by Matt Davies. This is an independent podcast made by CW9 Productions.